And now for our next news special report.
In a revelation that shakes the very foundations of our republic, Tucker Carlson's investigation exposes the FBI's scandalous transformation into a secret police force, actively persecuting and purging Trump supporters from its ranks. As we uncover this egregious corruption, the truth emerges. The FBI has abandoned its duty to uphold justice, becoming a politicized weapon of persecution. The shocking expose is a wake-up call for every American who values liberty and the rule of law. And just as the FBI has been exposed for its unjust persecution of individuals based on their political beliefs, our channel now faces a similar threat. YouTube has shut us down, leaving us demonetized and silenced, despite our efforts to comply and our appeals for partnership with alternative platforms, but we refuse to give up. We need your support now more than ever to ensure that the truth continues to be heard. Your generosity has carried us through before, and together we can emerge stronger and more resilient. So join us in this critical moment by donating at the links below this video. Now, the revelation that the FBI has been actively targeting and purging employees who support President Trump or hold conservative beliefs is a deeply troubling development that strikes at the very heart of our constitutional republic. As Tucker Carlson's investigation reveals, the FBI has abandoned its role as an impartial law enforcement agency and has instead become a politicized weapon wielded against those who dare to hold dissenting views. In his opening statement, Tucker Carlson lays bare the gravity of the situation. Take a look.
So the FBI is the most powerful law enforcement organization in the world, certainly in the free world, or what we've referred to for our lifetimes as the free world. So the nightmare scenario is that it becomes perverted, subverted into a secret police force, a tauntaun macoute accountable to politicians and used to punish the adversaries of the regime. That's the one thing you can't have happen, or your country will no longer be a free country. Well, there's some evidence, unfortunately, that is happening, and the latest comes from an FBI whistleblower.
Now, he warns that when a powerful law enforcement organization like the FBI becomes perverted and subverted into a secret police force accountable to politicians, freedom itself is at risk. The sentiment echoes the words of our founding father, James Madison, who cautioned that the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. Now, the case of the anonymous FBI whistleblower represented by Tristan Leavitt is a stark example of how this tyrannical accumulation of power is playing out within the FBI. And Leavitt describes the situation. Watch.
So what makes this a little bit different from your average FBI employee is that this employee, who has chosen to remain anonymous, did get swept up into the funnel of folks being investigated after January 6th. So the FBI cast a very wide net because of that. There was, frankly, some hysteria within the Bureau, almost McCarthyism, searching out anybody that had views with any tie, after searching out anybody who had any ties to events of that day, then examining their views. So this client particularly is someone who had decided on the day of January 6th to go down and hear President Trump's speech. After attending the rally, he walked down to the Capitol and stayed outside on the grounds. He never went inside the Capitol. He was never involved in any violence. He was never involved in any conflict. Eventually, the FBI became aware that he had been at the Capitol, which is ironic because the day after it, he self-reported his attendance. But that went, that didn't attract any notice within the FBI until a year later. And at that point, the hysteria was in full force. And so there were a number of FBI whistleblowers, several of whom we have represented, people like Steve Friend, Marcus Allen, Garrett O'Boyle, who were objecting in various ways to how the FBI was approaching its investigations of those related to January 6th. But this particular individual had his security clearance suspended, and that's when all of this hit. And so 1 year ago, I testified alongside three of those other whistleblowers, Steve Friend, Marcus Allen, Garrett O'Boyle, in front of the Weaponization Committee. And at the time, the FBI had just released information that they had all had their security clearances suspended, a couple of them revoked. And so as we started that hearing, Delegate Stacey Plaskett opened by saying, Chairman Jordan, you've invited these people here who are a threat to our national security. How dare you? And now, a year later, we've been able to pull back the curtain and see the FBI's documentation for why it did what it did with their clearances. And that's the context in which we've seen this sort of questioning going on, asking people if they ever supported President Trump. And mind you, it wasn't just that they asked these individuals. These were interviews by the Security Clearance Division of their fellow employees. So people who were compelled to answer, who had to either answer these questions from the Security Division or have their own security clearance called into question. And they were asked, did you ever socialize with these individuals? What was your association with them? And then asked these extremely intrusive questions. And so that's the context in which this very problematic set of questions came up. And what we are hearing is that this may be just the tip of the iceberg, that there were many, that certainly there have been allegations out there that once people got swept into that security funnel, that there was a purge of FBI employees that had conservative views or had skepticism of the vaccine or just hesitancy to receive it. And now in black and white, we've uncovered those documents because of our client's security appeal, where we've been able to see the basis on which his colleagues were questioned. And this is extremely problematic.
Now, the whistleblower who was suspended after attending the January 6th protests at the Ellipse and the U.S. Capitol found himself caught up in what Leavitt characterizes as a hysteria and almost McCarthyism within the Bureau. This witch hunt mentality, which sought to root out anyone with ties to the events of January 6th and examine their views, is antithetical to the principles of free speech and freedom of association enshrined in the First Amendment. The Founding Fathers understood the importance of protecting dissenting views and the right to freely associate with others. As Thomas Jefferson once wrote, "The opinions of men are not the object of civil government, nor under its jurisdiction." Now, the fact that the FBI is interrogating and purging employees based on their political beliefs and association is a clear violation of this foundational principle. Moreover, the lack of oversight and transparency in this process is deeply concerning. When asked if support for Donald Trump and the Second Amendment were disqualifying positions, well, here's Leavitt's response.
Well, that's clearly seems to be the case behind the scenes. Now, again, keep in mind, this is not what was put into the security clearance suspension letter that our client received or that other whistleblowers we have represented received. It's not what went into their revocation letters. So it's only now, like I said, pulling back the curtain that we see that it's behind closed doors, right? So it's within this black box of secrecy, and it's really this secret process that has no oversight from the outside, generally no oversight from the Inspector General, no oversight from Congress. That's an environment that allowed this to flourish, because otherwise we never would have known about this had we not seen those backing documents. Because again, the proposals themselves didn't reference any of these things that we would consider illegitimate. They just talked about whether someone engaged in violence, whether they broke laws on January 6th, and the things that stretched beyond that into personal political views, or again, even feelings about one's own bodily autonomy, all of that was hidden in these documents. And now that we've ripped the mask off the FBI, again, we are certainly going to push the Inspector General to see whether this happened in other cases. And we strongly expect that they will find that it did.
Make sure to check out the whole interview at tuckercarlson.com. Now, these politically motivated investigations and purges are happening within a black box of secrecy, with no oversight from the Inspector General or Congress. This lack of accountability creates an environment ripe for abuse and the suppression of dissent, as evidenced by the experiences of whistleblowers like Steve Friend, Marcus Allen, and Garrett O'Boyle, who objected to the FBI's handling of January 6 investigations. The ramifications of this scandal extend far beyond the individuals directly affected. When the FBI, an agency entrusted with upholding the law, engages in such blatant political persecution, it erodes public trust in our institutions and undermines the very foundations of our constitutional order. As Benjamin Franklin warned, whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech. It is imperative that we heed the warnings of our Founding Fathers and take action to address this grave threat to our republic. Congress must exercise its oversight powers and hold the FBI accountable for its actions. The American people must demand transparency and an end to this political persecution. Only by reaffirming our commitment to the principles of free speech, freedom of association, and the rule of law can we hope to preserve the liberty and justice that define our great nation. If you got value from this report, tap subscribe. My final thought is now. The Founding Fathers would be appalled by the FBI's transformation into a secret police force that persecutes Americans for their political beliefs. They understood that the preservation of liberty depends on the protection of free speech and the right to dissent. As James Madison warned, the essence of government is power, and power lodged as it must be in human hands will ever be liable to abuse. It is our duty as inheritors of the Founders' legacy to stand against this abuse and defend the principles that define our republic. We must demand accountability and transparency and an unwavering commitment to the Constitution. Only then can we hope to preserve the freedom and justice that our Founding Fathers fought so hard to establish.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Now keep up your quest for truth with this next news report. And if you found our channel enlightening, join the millions who agree with you. Tap subscribe. Thank you for watching the Next News Network.